Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming in today. I invited you all to kind of open up and give the community an overview of where we are at with several internal affairs investigations, several that has taken place since I've been in command and some that were part of a previous investigation. And so I'm going to talk about each and every one of these things kind of singular based on the case. The first one I want to talk about is the Stoneman Douglas internal affairs investigation, which was launched as a byproduct of the active shooter event that we had over at Stoneman Douglas. That's very well documented. And when I first took command here, it was important for me to understand the changes that were going to be needed for me to get a comprehensive review of the entire incident as it occurred, including the actions or inactions of our deputies. And that internal affairs investigation incorporated 7 deputies that were employed here and out of the Parkland district, many of which that you probably are familiar with in terms of their names. One of the things that we were able to examine and look at as a command staff was the performance aspects of the deputies that were out there that day. 7 deputies were the subjects of the internal affairs investigation at my request, and our findings, as this investigation is now concluded, included the termination of 2 employees yesterday. That was Deputy Edward Eason as well as Deputy Josh Stambaugh. The other 3 remaining deputies were found non-sustained, meaning no disciplinary action was taken against them. And so, as we conclude this final chapter for this organization, in terms of this internal affairs investigation, we are now going to continue to move forward with fixing the issues that exist here in the agency as it related to training. We're ahead of the curve in that. We are excelling, and we're just getting started. But I also want to touch on a few other things to provide accurate information out to this community about what's occurring on 2 other internal affairs investigations. The first is that of which that involved the young man DeLuca over in Tamarack, where 2 of my deputies, Deputy Christopher Krikovich and Sergeant Gregory Tony, were subjects of an internal affair investigation. One of the things we were able to do was to get this baseline internal affairs aspect completed, and it was turned over and submitted to the state attorney's office on May 10th of 2019. We are continuing to wait until the state attorney makes a decision as to whether or not there's going to be any criminal charges that they may pursue related to this incident before we can move forward and finalize our internal affairs investigation. Now, why is that critical? Why is that important? I continue to reach out to different community leaders here, and they are unaware of the process, and there's speculation that BSO is not doing anything related to this case. And that is so far from the truth. The truth is we can't move forward until we actually hear back from the state attorney, and that is no different from any other internal affairs investigation that take place, especially those that may have an implication of criminal charges towards a deputy. And so when we receive that case back, we will move forward as a command staff and make a corrective decision in terms of what disciplinary action needs to be finalized. And so I want that to be echoed back out to this community. The second case that I'm going to touch into involves Deputy George Sobrino. This is well documented. He's the deputy who was involved in striking an individual who was handcuffed in a hospital. That case, too, has gone through its baseline internal affairs investigation here in this organization, and we submitted that to the state attorney's office on May 15th of 2019. And the same processes are in place. When we receive the finalized decision-making aspect from the state attorney's office, it will come back into our office. Our command staff will examine it. It will make its way through its process through the Professional Standards Committee. And once all those things are checked and completed, I will make a decision. We won't be able to move any faster at this point. We've already put everything we needed to over in the state attorney's hand because our entire command staff understand how important this is and how vital it is for the community. And this isn't something that we're going to delay with or something that we're going to drag out. But the reality of it is it's not in our hands anymore. We have to wait till it returns back. And so that concludes where I wanted to touch in terms of some of these important areas. I'll answer a few questions before we move forward.
Sure. If you could go back to the internal investigation, please, just to clarify. I want to make sure I have my numbers correct. If you could go through the 7 deputies in the investigation and the outcomes.
Sure. So I'll give you 1 through 7. Scott Peterson, of course, was 1. Sergeant Brian Miller, Deputy Edward Eason, Deputy Josh Stambaugh, Detective Brian Goolsby, Deputy Art Perry, and Deputy Mike Kratz. So that concludes our set. Now let me add this also. When we conclude this meeting, you all will get a copy of the internal affairs investigation from the MSD internal affairs. All right, that's going to be submitted. It'll be online. I think it's about 150, maybe 200 plus pages. You'll have access to it.
Just to clarify, it was 2 who were fired yesterday.
Yes, correct.
Total of the 7, how many have been fired?
4.
So 4 fired and 3.
4 total.
Correct.
4 total. The other 3 have been cleared.
Correct.
And
Non-sustained.
Not sustained.
Right.
So what happens to them? Are they back at work?
They will return back to duty.
Is there kind of an overview or a headline as to what that internal affairs investigation found?
Yeah, you will see pretty much every element of it. So when we give you the document and the report, you'll see the synopsis aspects on what our finding was. In essence, it was neglect of duty.
Can you expand on that? Just kind of talk about your concerns of what it found or your thoughts on what it found?
Well, I can tell you we spent a lot of time looking at our policy and looking at the actions, looking at the statements that were provided by each of the deputies involved. And so, you know, after we take that totality of facts, it became clear to me and our command staff that this was neglect of duty. And it was one of the most severe consequences as we lost 17 people. Ma'am.
Other than those 7 deputies, is anyone who is on command above them going to be held responsible?
As of right now, when we looked at this thing, we had, of course, a captain out on scene that day and a lieutenant, but both of those had retired. But they were part of our examination process.
For those who have retired, I understand that, for example, Peterson also retired, but the investigation still involves him. Will those retirees also be investigated?
Not at this time. We didn't find the grounds to pull those cases up.
And why not again? Why were they not investigated?
When we looked at the administrative side of it and the actions that they took as a collective group in our command staff, there was not going to be something that we were going to reach back into and try to examine what disciplinary action we were going to be able to hold with them. And that was just a command staff decision. Anyone else?
Sorry, just to clarify, can you go through the 4 who have been fired?
Yep, I'll give you the 4 one more time. So, of course, we had Scott Peterson, Sergeant Brian Miller, Deputy Edward Eason, and Deputy Josh Stambaugh. All right, so thank you very much for your time.